Mike, what are your thoughts?
Much as the Deputy Insurance Commissioner had said, different insurance companies would have different liability characteristics. In the same breath, they would have different risk appetites as well. And therefore, from a perspective of pulling one big fund with 3 different insurance companies or 4 might be hard from an administrative perspective. Beyond that, I think P9 fund can be in a sense wherein there is one administrator, everyone buying into the same idea, everyone has the same template. Right? So I think if we are going to pull funds, then someone must have to raise their hand and say, I'll administer the funds. These are the characteristics of that fund. Is that within the appetite limit of your insurance company? Does it sit well with your liabilities? And I think that will work. But for, say, 3 insurance companies altogether saying, let's walk in together and run a fund, it might be because at certain points in time, the interests may not align, and therefore discussions may happen. So if you have an administrator on top of the 3, that I think would be a more plausible proposal than just putting it together.
In some of the earlier sessions today, we've heard a theme in part about the requirements under the regulations for public utility franchise holder to be 60% Filipino, but also to have their managing officers to be citizens of the Philippines. I mean, in your experience, Robert, has that presented an issue? I guess it's not insurmountable because
I think the 60% ownership is less of an issue, especially since there's plentiful capital available at the moment. The one mandating that all the executive positions must be Filipino. I know that our manager has had to pull in any managers they have for specific infrastructure that is from a country back in the Philippines to sort of play a role. But I don't really understand the reason for maintaining that. That might have been something that was put into place many years ago when there was an economic reason or justification. I just can't understand what it would be. But many of these projects really are very complex, and I don't think we have a monopoly on the talent. In fact, increasingly, because many other countries around the world are also putting up infrastructure, there's really a search for the most qualified personnel to bring in, and we are essentially passing on that talent pool by insisting that it has to be local. And I think it's also a disincentive maybe for foreign participation, because these projects do require significant commitment. And so many of them will have professionals that they feel are the ones that can see this to fruition. And denying them that comfort that is going to be managed by someone that they know has delivered in the past, just because he doesn't have the right password, I think is a disincentive that maybe we are not very aware of at the moment. I do think is a significant issue that must somehow be addressed.
Thank you. I guess turning closer to my home in Australia at the moment, we've seen recently where the East-West Link project was overturned by a subsequent administration. I'd just be really interested to hear the panel's thoughts about the perception of political risk here in the Philippines. I know we've spoken about it earlier on today with different panels, but particularly in light of the administration change next year. Alex, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Australia, I could mention France, where there was another PPP that was cancelled after having awarded, that caused now the government to have to pay a big compensation to the private company that had won that. So it's definitely not unique to the Philippines. Actually, haven't been that many expropriation around, which is the worst case scenario for some of these projects. I mean, who knows what the next administration will bring? Hopefully, the support for infrastructure will remain. You look at what the investors are doing, and all the investors coming to the Philippines, the people buying government bonds and all that, they are able to take a fairly long-term view of the country. They're buying 25-year government bond at a rate which appears very low. I'm not sure to put all my savings and at this sort of return for Philippines government risk over 3 or 4 administrations. But there is a perception, I mean, you see that in the credit rating, which is the obviously a little bit synthetic way of assessing the country risk. There is a perception things are going better. When we are involved in trying to make some of these infrastructure projects happen, we realize that there are actually a lot of issues, and when you start digging a bit and going into some of the details, there is a willingness to make those projects happen. I'm not sure the risk would be very much in, again, the worst case scenario, expropriation and all that, but we see some concern about getting the contracts enforced when you see like pricing, tariff formulas which are being questioned. I think the water sector was mentioned a bit earlier, but you have seen that in the toll road sector as well. There's, I think, a pending case for the rail sector as well. All of these infrastructure sectors, yeah, you see all these cases, and you can understand why some of the foreign investors were very keen to look at the country. They are asking what is that going to happen to me in 5 or 7 years. So this is, again, there's a bit of coordination between the agencies, and again, a lot more can be done in that area, and drafting the right contract which will not be questioned by the next administration. That can also be done by tendering the contracts in a way that the benefits of these PPP programs are actually delivered to the end users, and there will be questions on the tariff formula that is put in the contract. My recommendation would be, rather than trying to raise a very large concession fee from the successful bidder on day one, rather go for the tariff level as the bidding parameter, where the savings will be delivered to the end users, so that they won't be complaining whenever there's a new PPP awarded to the private sector, that this is basically a cozy arrangement between the government and the private sector, because they actually see the benefits of trying to make those infrastructure projects more efficient.
Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess it's part and parcel of doing business here in the Philippines. It's a question that's come up most recently, at least within the company, on 2 fronts. One is we're preparing for our first infrastructure debt exposure, and obviously the questions about politics and enforcement of laws come into play. The other is that President Aquino is scheduled to visit Canada, and therefore that is a question that's foremost in some of the committees down there in Canada about the changes in administration. And Sun Life has made it a stance that, you know, we've been in the Philippines for about 120 years, going through different administrations, part and parcel of doing business. We have a small infrastructure debt exposure, but we have a bigger business to run down here in Manila. It's a risk that we're willing to take, and it's a risk that we have taken for 120 years, and therefore for us, it's, you know, it's not a showstopper. It's just really something that we have to do with, and I think we've done well over the past 100 years.
What about you, Rob? What are your thoughts?
I think I kind of agree with the other statement that it should be handled in the contract stage. I don't think we need a special clause that says that if there's a change of administration, then people can opt out. You know? It's like a marriage. You got to grab the prenup when you're still talking to each other. So if there's an engagement, then there should be rules for disentanglement as well. And I think people would be in the Philippines if there was not some respect for the rule of law. And as long as we subscribe to that basic principle, and then we have a process that can be observed, we do have remedy beyond the regulatory body. I think that's what's being exercised right now. And as long as people feel that there is that avenue when you think that you've been, you know, disadvantaged, then it's part of your risk premium adjustment of the discount rate that you use when you discount those future cash flows. And if you think that that figure is enough, then you go in. At the end of the day, it should be seen in the context of many, many investments, not just one. And I think that's probably the hurdle. It's always making that first one. But you know, when you have a portfolio of these things, you can have one go bad, but the risk premium that you imputed in the other should more or less make up for that one that didn't go right. And even then, it's not the end of the world. So it's like part of doing business in an emerging economy. Would we prefer just a dictatorship for 20 years so that there is no change to administration? Probably not. So I think that's how we should look at it.
Vida, from a regulatory point of view, I imagine the change of administration won't impact the regulatory environment too much, but what are your thoughts on the change of administration, particularly in light of the process you're going through now with looking at the RBC and the clarifications?
It's really something scary if it happens. I cannot imagine, an insurance company where we approve the application for investment in PPP and then suddenly something happens. But I think some concept of a contingent liability funding we have the government would be very helpful, and that would give us some level of comfort, especially for the investors, that if anything happens, then at least that is something that they can.
And I guess in terms of the discussion earlier about thinking about the resourcing arrangements to actually commit to these deals, but also finding the resources to satisfy nationality requirements. We're looking at international investors and promoting investment from international investors. But I guess what also comes with that international investment angle of people like my firm, the international advisors. I mean, what sort of expectations do you have from an international advisory point of view to really help, I guess, bring international best practice to the projects and to help, I guess, in some ways, lobby government or influence government or the private sector to really move towards best practice? Mike, you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I would say in the Philippines, as I said earlier, we're a little bit thin on manpower to actually look at it from a project basis. We look at it from a private perspective, that's because it's easier for us to chew on because we are a debt shop for most reasons, backing up our liabilities, less of a private equity shop. In essence, I would say the discussions over the past 2 weeks had brought before the need for advisors and the need for third-party consultants, because we were sitting on an infrastructure debt proposal wherein most of the technical aspects, technical studies, insurance covers, and legal opinions have been provided to us by the owners of the project. Which obviously, yes, you can take a look at it from the perspective of getting snippets from it, insights from it, but whether you have enough capability within yourself to say, can it be otherwise? Then you just have to work with a team out there who can provide you with expertise. As not just Bob had said earlier, when they had gone into the possibility of funding infrastructure projects on a private equity fund. They were very honest with themselves right off the bat that this is not an expertise that they hold, and therefore had to form a committee to find someone who could provide them that. So I think in the same breath, that would be how we are looking at it, and how we think we should proceed moving forward.
What about you, Rob? What are your thoughts?
I think that's what the PPP Center is for. To advise the government on what's the best way to adopt best practice, and I think that's what they're doing. It's very hard to have multiple council of elders that different people can go to. I think it's very confusing. I think the idea is this is a very important program of this government, and I'm sure if we do want to provide an opportunity for our underserved people to continue establishing an institution that would really be responsible for making sure that this thing goes well, because it's very significant invested expectation that this will do well so that it will continue. And we can't risk in the initial going to have a disaster. The willingness of people to continue is fact dependent. So we have to make sure that we, at least the first few projects, we almost have to make sure they succeed. So, and for that to happen, the confidence must be there, and that's where you bring in everything into the equation, including whatever advisory. And there's a lot of multilateral institutions that are very willing to provide that oversight. Then I think that's sufficient. But you know, we should just have one, and then each investor will revert to the advisors that he or she thinks or it thinks will best provide it with the right insight into whether to proceed or not. And I think that's what they're saying, Mike, when you meant that you know, you might be interested in the slightly higher yielding part of the risk. Somebody you might be looking at it more from the lower risk but very guaranteed portion. I'm sure you'll have different advisors looking at different types of parts of it. So it becomes very, very unwieldy if you're trying to say we're going to have this oversight framework in place where people can go to just validate whatever it is that they're doing. At the end of the day, you pull the trigger, so you need what you feel.
Yeah, absolutely. Having a clear consistency and message and risk profile. I guess just before we quickly throw questions, I might just ask each of you if there was one critical action or change that you'd like to see that would really boost the investment appetite for institutional investors. What would it be? Start with Alex.
Yeah, I would say the cooperation. I mean, the banks are there. The banks, I mean, Mike mentioned the ability to analyze all the risks and all of that. That's what banks are staffed for, both local and international, actually. We'd love to work more with the institutional investors to deliver this long-term funding that those infrastructure projects typically require.
I think I concentrated too much on clarity on the RTC. So I think that's one big factor for us on the insurance space. Again, from the banking side of things, swap markets, the ability to be able to strip coupons in a way, just because if banks are offering 10, 12 years, can I typically say, can I strip the coupons and back end all of that coupons so that I get higher derivatives? So from that perspective, I'd probably look into the RBC and probably look at into the development of the derivatives market to somehow suit the liability needs that I have.
What about you, Robert?
Well, very selfishly, I'd say that I'd like that funds which are put up for the purpose of investing in infrastructure be given personality into bidding, so that they don't have to ally themselves with industrial partners. At the end of the day, many of these infrastructure projects all over the world are sort of built out this way, so they've established a mechanism for ensuring that there is operational expertise that is brought to the equation. At the moment, I think the criteria for who will be allowed to bid requires that you must have some operating history or operating capability. And if we're talking here about insurance companies and being able to participate, maybe eventually when you discover that you're not getting paid enough for what's essentially an equity at risk, you might, like us, go into the capital portion of the pie. Being able to bid as a fund and bring along partnership dealt with in other parts of the world to invest in a particular project, I think is something that actually might benefit by creating a new investor base that might participate in the government's PPP.
And Vida, what about you?
Yes, well, being in government, of course, how we wish that all these PPP projects will succeed. We are encouraging, of course, investments in PPP projects. We would like to have insurance companies find investment opportunities in this. And so we'll see how the concern of could be solved. We'll look into that.
Thank you. I guess we're going to open it up now to some questions. If anyone has any questions of our panelists.
We actually allocated 10 minutes for this Q&A to the panel and to the moderator from the floor.
Okay, well, I guess if there's no questions on the floor, I'll just throw the mic to give some concluding comments.
We've heard from all the panelists. Just to summarize maybe in a few sentences, I think we're hearing that there's still a lot of inertia around PPP projects that's slowly going down. It's always good to bring out in open discussions whatever is hindering such programs, and therefore, by acknowledging that those exist, we may be able to solve them or provide solutions to them. It is not only a problem of government as it is a problem of the Filipino people, I would say, and joined by foreigners, obviously hand in hand, talking about what can we thresh out from a private perspective, what's hindering us from delivering in the projects, what's hindering us from a private perspective, what's hindering us from a public perspective. Always good to have a forum like this, bring out all the things that need to be dealt with, and hopefully from the learnings that we have today, push it at a much faster pace. I know that the administration will change in 2016. I just hope that we have the same experience as what Bob and GSIS had. But for about 2 years, it was starting slow. It was full of inertia. And then 2 years later, and not even a year more, they are 2/3 into their program. So I would say, let's all join in. We've had a discussion. Let's put it into action, and hopefully we'll be there in a matter of a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you to thank our great panel of attendees. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the moderator and the panel members of this afternoon session. Before we proceed to the next part of the program, we also ask everyone to, as we close the sessions, give a round of applause to the moderator and panel members of the last 4 sessions since this morning.